Okay, so I had a quick inquiry. Somebody was asking about the backseat mod in the Jeep, so let's cover that real quick. What I did, I've worked in commercial vehicle sales for 20 years, and I did not want to move the seatbelt mounting locations. Because if you're in an accident, the first thing that's going to happen is the lawyers look for any hole, no matter how small, in the equation, and everybody gets sued. So if you're relocating seatbelt mount locations from the factory, reinforced locations, that gets really complicated. So my entire goal here was to move the seat back 3 inches so that I could gain that much more legroom up front without moving the seatbelt mount locations, and I was able to accomplish that, and more easily than I thought. So if you look here, here's the original mount location right here and right here. Those two holes are offset to this bracket right here. And there's bolt number 1, there's bolt number 2. And what I did was I moved it up that distance. And then you can see there's a spacer now because this floor rolls up. So where before I had a flat surface right here to work with these two offset holes that are representative of either side of this bracket right here, the gold bolt and the silver bolt. Now what's happening is I've moved it back, but I've got this elevated ramp kind of lip here to the back deck where the cargo goes. So I had to compensate for that. So I used a bushing right here. It's a PVC, or I don't know what it is made of. It's a hard plastic. It's a drop pin kit for your transfer case bar underneath the Jeep, which is, I don't know if you can see that. It's anyway, they go in your transfer case support bar right there. It's a drop kit, and I had extra of those little 1-inch spacers, and they worked perfectly for that location. And then a second one over here, same concept. It's just there's 3 mounting locations for the seat back here, because inside of the seat right there is a pin that goes in and connects one side to the other. So you have 2 mount locations on the small seat side, and then a third one over here. So same idea, they're just not offset over here. So you've got this one up here, this one down here, and then underneath there's that spacer. This is what makes this possible, to keep the seats at the same alignment, I guess, if you will. So seats are now back 3 inches. Now it does become a little bit more like a stadium seating because you're going up in elevation a little bit. So you lose a little bit of headroom, but I'm 6 feet tall, and it didn't affect me because my length is mostly from my waist down. So I still had plenty of headroom without hitting the ceiling. And the seat belts are in the same location. And as you can see, they're in the same location as in the front, in reference to the seat back. In the seat, because we're moving the seats back, the second part of this, and this is really simple, but because that seat base is not reliant on any part of the seatbelt configuration, and it's just sitting there, this literally, instead of being mounted, sorry about all the junk here, to these clips that go on the front side, which I just have the bolts right here. I don't have the little clip bracket that goes here. Usually those feet go into those clips. Well, now the feet are going to rest just inside on the other side of this brace. As you can see, I have them just sitting there. So if we rock this back and do it with one hand, it actually wedges itself in there perfectly. No installation required. So people may not like the idea that that seat is not secured to the floor, but if you're seat belted in, the seat, that's a big piece of foam, so I really don't see it as a projectile in a crash that's going to injure you. And if you are in a situation in a crash that's that bad, you've got other problems other than a big foam seat floating around. Same applies to this side. The seat cushion also sits down into this recessed on this side rather than this side. And as far as the seat belts, now this is the other little item. Because we've raised them up, you could no longer easily get the seat belt to click into the I don't know, the locking part, the receptacle there. So I just bought these extenders on eBay. They're like 12 bucks. And on this, you have to get a special kind. You have to get, this is called a, there's a model number to it. But this cutout has to be wider than average, because the average seat belt in more current model cars is thinner. And so the first set I bought wouldn't clip in to that receptacle because the factory is wider. If you look at like a Honda or something more current, this cutout in the center of that is narrower. So I'll look and put it in the description as to the description of this type of retractor or clicker. Anyway, that was the key thing to being able to make the seatbelts still work in all their factory mount, because the factory mount location doesn't change. That stays the same, both on the wall and on the floor. And then because I don't need a center person, I just bungeed that down, because we're not using a center person in the Jeeps. Center person location. We could, I just chose not to. So now that you've got your seats moved back, which, let me talk about that for one more second. So I used self-tapping bolts. So I drilled out the hole. I can't remember if it was a 3/16 or 5/16. I think it's a 5/16. I drilled out the holes, and then I got self-tapping bolts, which actually was included in my suspension lift on this Jeep. So I used the bolts as pilots to tap and die basically the hole, so that I had thread locations in my new mount location. And that's how I got the bolts to bolt back into the floor. And then I, of course, plugged the hole with the old bolt there. So that's my little trick to tapping and dying the bolts. And then I bought extra bolts after I self-tapped them with those self-threading or self-tapping bolts. Alright, so the last mod is to the bottom of that back seat cushion, and it's right here. And because we're moving the seat back, this is where the seat belt comes up between the seats. So I just took a, I don't know, it's a multi-tool from Harbor Freight. It vibrates. It's like a vibrating putty knife. It's actually one of the best tools I have. And I just cut this, I just notched this out a little bit. So I took that piece of plastic out so that I just needed about another ½ inch, so that when I put this in, do this one-handed maybe. So when I put the seat in, I got a little bit more tolerance right there for this seat belt. Because before, it connected down here around this narrow neck. Now I'm making it connect up here, higher up the neck. And there's my mod. Low tech, but effective, and most importantly, completely legal. So there you have it. I hope this helps you guys make your back seat without all the junk more roomy.